Welcome, everyone. I'm Kim Littlefield, and I'm a partner at Keystone Partners. We are thrilled that you can join us today at this very busy time of year. We're so excited to see so many of you register. I just want to tell you a little bit about Keystone because this is a marketing effort for Keystone. We are an organization that specializes in the human moments of people's careers. We focus on leadership development, outplacement, and executive coaching. And these are times when leaders transform, leaders emerge. And that's why this topic is so interesting to us, because these are times of uncertainty for organizations and for leaders. And we feel as an organization, we turn that into an opportunity. So our topic today is From Disruption to Direction, Leading Through Organizational Change. And shortly, I'm going to introduce you to our three fabulous panelists who were gracious enough to volunteer their time today. But before we get started, just wanted to review a few housekeeping items. First of all, this webinar is being recorded. We are going to share it with all of you via email, along with any other resources that we mentioned today. If you have questions, and we love them, please submit them in the Q&A. The chat is open for you to communicate with each other. And we did get a couple of pre-questions that we will have people pop on live to ask, just to kind of add a little variety to this. And then I'm also going to introduce you right now to our friend of the firm, Angelica Stilling, who is with TMEC, which stands for the Talent Management Executive Consortium. She'd just like to say a few words about this unbelievable organization. So, Angelica, I'm going to pass the baton to you.
Thank you very much, Kim. I'm happy to represent TMEC, and on behalf of our group, we're very grateful for the sponsorship and partnership with Keystone. Historically, and of course, moving forward to bring great content to some of our members as well. I've been with TMEC for a couple of years, really doing a number of things, partnering with the content team, social committee, the communications, leading communications for the last year. And I'll be stepping into a broader role next year. So very excited to be representing the group. A little about us. TMEC is a growing consortium community of talent management executives. We are now international. We have a lot of members in the Chicago area, but we also have some executives and leaders who are spread out across the nation. We started a few years ago, but we're, again, rapidly growing, over 400 at this point, continuing to bring members in. And along with our sponsors and partners, we offer a variety of learning opportunities, opportunities to innovate with peers, colleagues in this space. And we also sponsor a number of networking activities. One of my favorite parts of being involved with TMEC has been getting to know a wonderful group of colleagues who are as passionate about talent management as I'm sure everyone on this call is. So if you'd like to learn more about TMEC, on the next slide, we do have an onboarding session that's scheduled for this Friday. It's our last event of the year, but we are excited to be kicking off much more in 2026 for our members. I'll post a link to this registration if anyone would like to learn more, or even current members, if you'd like to understand how you can get involved in 2026, we'd love to see you. And I'll also post our LinkedIn page. So if you'd like to learn more, participate in some of our events, we'd love to have you, love to walk you through some of our offering. Feel free to connect with any of us. I think there are a few of us on the call, including Sandra Garcia, our founder, Tracy Delgado, and so on. So I'll turn it over back to you, Kim. Thank you.
Angelica, congratulations on your new role with the organization, and thank you for your dedication to the HR community. So great to have you all on. So now I'm going to move to introducing our panelists. We're going to start with Todd because he's popping up first in my vision here. Todd Prescott is the VP of HR for MGMA, which stands for the Medical Group Management Association. We also have Alison Ricci, who is the HR director at KeHE Distributors. And then last but not least, we have Laura Thiele, who is the Chief People Officer at Optimizely. So We're going to do a poll in about a minute, but before we head into the poll to get a pulse check from all of you as attendees, I would love to hear from each of you. The first question, which is, could you take a minute to tell us about your company so people are familiar with what your organization is all about? And then could you tell us what is the biggest organizational change that you are facing currently or you have faced recently? So Todd, I'm going to start with you. If you could just take a minute, please.
Thanks, Kim. Yes. So the Medical Association is an association that helps medical practices that range in size from single provider rural clinics all the way up to major health systems. And we provide resources to help them operate and do anything that they need to do in the medical field and anybody that's health related. And we are based in Colorado, where I am sitting in a very, very cold and snowy environment, like some of you on this call. And we also have an office in Washington, D.C., where we work with Washington legislators and congressmen to work on healthcare reform and change. And we are 100 years old in March. So we are a very, very established association. And the biggest organizational change that we have been working through is our operating model simply was not meeting the needs of our customer base. So last year, we made the decision to completely change how we operate from a business perspective, which led to a major operational change in how we staff, who we have employed, and how we go through a massive restructure and organizational change that we are literally waist deep in today. So that's a brief overview of how we are operating today.
Thank you, Todd. And you're going to hear more details of some tricks and tips that we've gotten from Todd as we prepped for this webinar. So Alison, we'll move over to you. Could you tell us a little bit about KeHE Distributors and one of the organizational changes that you've been going through?
Excellent. Thanks so much, Kim. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. So I'm part of the KeHE HR organization, and essentially many of you will probably be familiar with KeHE because we help provide all those great products that you like to stock your refrigerator with or your cupboard with, whether it's Jewel Osco or any of your local grocers. KeHE helps bring that to life and into your household. So what do we actually truly do? We are a curator of very specialty food brands. So that means that we not only curate those brands, but we bring them to you or your favorite retailer. We focus on natural, organic, specialty, and fresh products. And we supply over 31,000 retailers around North America, including your favorite grocery store and some of your e-commerce retailers. And so for us, I have just passed my 90-day mark at KeHE Distributors. And as I'm starting to unpack the organization, I've got a couple of changes that are just peeking right around the corner for us. We're kind of taking a look at making some very large scale operational type of changes that are going to have big impacts to functions. We've got some cultural changes that come along with when you make larger impacts to functions, and ultimately some organizational changes around the corner as well.
Thank you, Alison. In a moment, Laura, I'm going to move to you. So just as a reminder, part of what these are all about is networking. And if I've learned one thing with being at Keystone for as many years as I've had, it's networking, networking, networking. When we're in HR roles, we don't do it. So this is an opportunity for y'all to network with each other. Look each other up on LinkedIn, connect. Okay, that's my little plug. Laura, you've had some vast experience with a number of acquisitions, so we want to hear more about that. But tell us a little bit about Optimizely.
Sure, no problem. So Optimizely is a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for digital experience platform. So we're in marketing technology. If you would compare what SuccessFactors or Workday is for HR in terms of a suite, it's very similar to what marketing uses Optimizely in terms of their suite for creating a digital experience for marketers to make their life easier. We're a 1,600 person company, $400 million revenue company. We are private equity owned by Insight Partners, and we're in 11 different countries. I'm based in Phoenixville, And I've been with Optimizely for over 5 years now.
Thank you. And imagine the change you've gone through. And I know you will share the journey with us, especially being based in 11 countries and being private equity owned. So, Todd, I'm going to move over to you because when we did this prep call, one of the things we were so intrigued with in your toolkit was what you called the war room. And I know, that could have a negative connotation, but in your context, it was very positive. But before we get to that, Megan's reminding me we need to launch the poll. We just want to get a pulse check on how everyone's doing in the audience and where they're at. So here we go. Poll number 1. What's driving the most change at your organization right now? Could please take a moment to answer that. Yeah, all over the place, from restructuring, leadership transitions, economic pressures, no surprise there, growth, scaling. I hear that word scaling every day from someone, a customer, colleague. Economic pressures is almost going in the lead here. No surprise. Just take another second to run that. Okay, let's see what we've got here. All right, so it looks like in the lead, we have restructurings. Second, we have growth and scaling, and economic pressures and cost reduction as number 3. So that gives you all, as panelists, kind of an idea of where we are. Okay, so Todd, love to hear about the war room and what were some of your tips, tools. I know you had snacks in your war room, but what else? Who was involved in that war room? How did you even think about coming up with it? If you could just take a couple minutes to tell us about that, and then Alison will move over to you.
Yeah. So what we lovingly called the war room was literally a conference room in our building that we took over. And we, as silly as it sounds, we even papered over the windows because we needed a very cohesive bonding and prep room for all of the elements that go into an organizational transformation that we needed to get discussed. And the reason that we even did it in that way was I really wanted a very visual space for us to be able to sit, work, and make very important decisions. And what that meant for me and my teams was we literally posted every org chart on big poster board on every wall. And we also posted every open position that we were going to be recruiting for, every position we were going to be eliminating, and anybody who was going to be impacted, and which people were going to be applying for which jobs, and who applied to the ones we thought they would and who didn't. And we just wanted it to be incredibly visually organized. We also had calendars so that we knew if anybody on the team was going to be in or out, or if we knew that people who were being impacted were having a birthday or an anniversary or something that could compound the impact to them. So we created this war room. Kim said snacks. We had snacks. I learned what my executives like to snack on for their comfort foods, my HR team, and then anybody else who was had access to that space. We also literally put a badge reader on the room so that nobody could go in. All of you on the call know that most of the time you're doing restructure and reorganizations work, the level of confidentiality and protecting of our staff was very, very high. So asking my building director to make a room that he even couldn't go in was driving him bonkers. But it was exactly what we needed to be able to comfortably sit together and share. And the way that we used the room was my HR team and recruiters would meet very early in the morning, and we would discuss how we were going to address the day, the executive team, et cetera. So we knew everybody who had applied overnight, every interview that went on the day before. And then after we were done meeting, then we invited the executive team in and we planned the day, like who was interviewing whom and who was going to be where and what needed to be reprioritized so that we could make more room for more interviews and things like that. So we definitely used that war room. And I'll tell you, by the time we were done, the room was a mess. Like there were candy wrappers and there were bits of paper and posters that had fallen off the walls, and like it was a true war room
True
space.
war room. Yeah. Todd, what was the biggest impact it had on the team?
It was precision organization. Like everybody knew everybody's actions every single day. And it's where my team and I got to really lead and take control of how the executives were going to, even down to how they were going to speak with their staff, to make sure that every interaction was a human interaction and not a business interaction. While it's business decisions, there are people that are being impacted by them. So I wanted to make sure that the executives and we all could speak from the same language and be able to in a highly organized way, really truly lead the process.
And how did the vision of HR change after having these war rooms throughout the company?
Well, it's for us, it was very interesting. We're not a huge organization. I listen to Laura and Alison, and I think, wow, I would never want that much responsibility. However, what we gained by leading this organizational change for the executive team, and for the record, this was one element of a complete operational change. It was what we were responsible for. And since then, my team has been seen much more as a leadership and an advisory capacity than a ticket taking, we run your benefits and we send the naughty kids to you. Like, so we definitely have really increased our presence in the organization and our value.
Love it. Oh my gosh, it's music to everyone's ears, I'm sure, being that trusted advisor. Thank you, Todd. Alison, let's move over to you. You had mentioned that you have a stakeholder assessment that bucketed your leaders. How does that sort of template that you use shape your communication strategy, and what's your playbook for getting the resistors on board with any changes?
So the one great thing about a stakeholder plan is essentially it kind of helps you use like an everyday tool like Microsoft Excel and actually just kind of create your plan in one document, because your first tab will be what's your current to future state. So you can kind of set that table so you understand where I am today, where are we going? And then you fold that into your next piece is going to be that stakeholder plan. And that's really where you get to kind of dig in and identify who your key stakeholders are going to be for this change and for the transition. You're able to kind of identify what's going to be their reaction to change. And we've kind of played with a couple of different reactions depending on company culture. We worked with a very casual culture, and we kind of like everybody loved the weather. And so we triangulated around hot for like, ooh, steamy hot summer. They are totally on board with the change. They're loving it. Lukewarm was kind of like that partly sunny day where they're kind of, sounds kind of good, but I'm not sure. And then the cold, like the Arctic, no way in heck, don't want that change. And so that enabled us to kind of identify the 1/3 that are going to be all in, the 1/3 that are going to be sitting on the fence waiting for more information, and the third, I don't even want to make the journey up on top of the fence. I am clearly on the other side of this. And what that allowed us to do is then we could kind of double click into what are your expectations and fears for each of those three kind of buckets. Then we could start planning what are the actions? What did we need to solve for to kind of get them on board? And then kind of put together planned actions and dates. And then we actually flip that to our comms plan where we had it listed by stakeholder, the kind of what their concerns or issues were. We talked about maybe relevant facts or key messages, how we were going to deliver the message, what that message content, and the frequency of that. And that kind of helped shape up our plan for how we were going to characterize and roll out our communications for change.
Love the reference to the weather, and I'm seeing that pop up in chat too. People can relate to it. Shifting to the human side of the change and transformation, Laura, I'm going to pass it over to you. I know you've been through, you said 3 or 4 acquisitions over the last 5 years, which is a lot. In your opinion, what's the bare minimum of non-negotiable change versus where you could be flexible? with the change?
So that's a great question. I think when you're looking at acquisitions, you want to get in and build trust immediately with the company that you're acquiring. And everybody has something that's different to what they're interested in that means a lot to them. So some individuals may be really tied to their company because they have a generous paternity policy, or some individuals may be tied because they really love their recognition system, or they love how they are able to work hybrid. And when you have a new company come in that's acquiring you, you're naturally asking questions to say, is this a company that I want to work for? But you're assessing that based on how you're treated in terms of your internal motivators, or your intrinsic to say, hey, am I reaching that, or extrinsic to say, hey, this is how I'm, driven in terms of my rewards, for example, or whatever is important to you. So when you're acquiring a company, I think working through that and understanding the different motivation levels is really important. So I think there's non-negotiables in terms of a policy that is firm, where there's not an ability to have things changed. Let's say the CEO really believes in an in-office culture and the company that you're acquiring is hybrid, then that's a non-negotiable if the CEO is making a decision to say this is an in-office policy. But yet, if there's other areas or benefits where there is some change, let's say somebody has a 14-week maternity policy and the existing company only has 6 weeks, well, is there a way to identify if there's a bridge to maybe move it from 6 weeks to 10 weeks, or 6 weeks to 12 weeks? So somebody can come down a bit who's getting acquired, but the existing company may be able to go up. So we've, experienced this real hand over the last 5 years, where we've worked with 4 companies that were acquired. And, it's really important in terms of how you communicate, how you build trust, and how you can be flexible and try to bring the best of the company that you're acquiring, so that they feel that there's a sense of agency and there's a purpose and there's a tight connection. But at the same time, it's like not a free for all. And it is, a really valid approach to say there are some policies or approaches that aren't flexible. And so it's figuring out, using the art, not necessarily the science of HR here, to figure out where are you going to lose people compared to where you're going to gain people, and how does that equate? It's never going to be even, but I don't think you want it 100 to 0, so it's figuring out how to strike that balance between the non-negotiables is important.
One of the things that's striking me is you really listened to the people from the acquired company, to what was important at their company that you could bring in. So that's the communication, is you were a really good listener. The other thing you mentioned when we were prepping is the radical transparency that's become really a cultural strength for Optimizely. Can you tell us more about that? I thought that was really a neat story.
Yeah, sure. So one of the companies that we acquired was called Welcome, and it became our CMP platform, which is like a marketing project management solution that became integral to our Optimizely One, our suite. And, the leader who was the CEO of the company is very entrepreneurial and is with us today as our president of the company. And he brings a lot of great energy and enthusiasm and a really fun way of communicating that is very direct and very much trust-based in terms of having conversations to help people succeed, but at the same time, let you know clearly what may not be working. So, having that radical candor and that radical transparency does let people know and really just lays it out how it is. At the same time, opens up a dialogue, and the dialogue is based on trust. One of the interesting parts around this is the company that was acquired had a heavier base of employees in Dhaka, Bangladesh. And we've now grown that location, I'm going to say roughly from about 70 employees when they were acquired in 2001 to over 330 employees. And that location has a very unique culture. I visited Dhaka, Bangladesh myself in terms of an open conversation dialogue. And so you can really, when you go and visit and see and dialogue around topics, it's really fascinating to see. Whereas perhaps in another company, I worked at SAP for 14 years, very traditional and very comfortable in terms of what people say and what don't say in terms of a corporate world. right? Certainly there's certain cultures there that are more outspoken than others, but I had not seen this level of constructive dialogue in my entire career since I had visited the Dhaka Bangladesh team. So it's an interesting story, and it's permeated through the organization. Now, that can be challenging when you're working in HR. If there's an individual or teams that push a fair amount and really want to inquire and understand why, right? That's not an easier approach, but it's really valuable in terms of really understanding what's behind the change. And so how you do build that in through the culture, I think is really important.
That's I love the story, and it also is just a reminder of you're actually getting the water cooler conversations. They're actually coming forward to you with what's on their mind, which is great. Todd, let's shift over to you. You had a phrase, red carpet moments, that Megan and I thought was really a great way of highlighting some of the things that you felt you did well. And one of the things that you did that you've said really impacted your employees was a showcase day. Can you tell us a little bit more about that showcase day and what that looked like?
Absolutely. And it ties into a lot of what Laura was just talking about with radical transparency. And I think one of the approaches, so the red carpet moment is something that I use with my team all the time, is how do we make sure that the people in our presence feel like they're being honored in our presence, and create those red carpet moments. It could be from applicants to anybody that we encounter during our day. And one of the things that our staff really does value is being told what's going on. And it's that fine balance that we as HR folks have to balance, is what can we tell them and be true to the confidentiality of the organization and the process, and telling them everything we can. And we leaned in, like a lot of what Laura was talking about, to the radical side of transparency. We tried to tell them everything we could, and they did value that. And it didn't make everything better all the time. I'm not going to lie. Like, people are sensitive to changes in their environment. And so what we were going through as part of this transformation was partially an organizational model on how we operate as a business. And then we assessed the skills we need to carry the new operating model forward against the people we had in the business, and had to make some decisions around that role no longer serves the business. So we had to reduce some positions and then also increase our headcount in spaces that address those skills. And we sat with every person one-on-one and said, your position is going away. However, there are going to be a lot of positions we're posting as we're moving forward through this transformation. And in order to help them make decisions, and some people chose not to stay, and some people were chosen to move on, and we hired a lot of people. But I wanted to make sure that part of the red carpet moment we provided them was to give them a full sense of what we were doing, meaning what were the new departments going to look like? What were the operating structures going to be? Who's reporting to whom? And let them see it. So we built what I call a showcase day, and we did this a couple of times, where we showed them org charts and we showed them what it meant to work in this department. And then we brought in people to help with resume writing, and we brought in people to talk about financial planning, and we brought in psychology help with our EAP program. And my team was on call to everybody. And then I asked the executive team to step in and take any one-on-one conversation that a staff member may have to either express concerns or ask, like, what would it mean for me to work in an organization that you run? And just made it so, like, oh, and I fed them, so they all came. But it was a really, the point was to say, like, some of you are going to just choose not to be a part of this, and that's fine, but here's what you're signing up for if you are going to be joining us. And then once we did that, we hired a lot of people. And then a few weeks after that, we did a second showcase day where we brought in the offices from Washington, D.C. and anybody who's remote in the country together. And we had another full showcase day. It was a 3-day event. I brought in directors and what we call our senior leadership team on day one, and brought in people leaders for the afternoon, and just taught them, and told them and asked them, here's what it means to be a leader in our organization if you choose to stay with us. Day 2 was all staff. and we were offsite, and we did a full day of what it meant to work in these departments, and we brought in a motivational speaker, and then on day 3 was a complete day of celebration. We had a company picnic. We celebrated. We talked. We met. We got to hang out with our staff, food trucks, the whole shebang. So it was that's the type of red carpet that I was trying to provide, so that people could make their own decisions along the way. And we also needed to blow off a little bit of the steam. It was stressful, and we didn't know what we were doing all the time, and we were just trying to make sure we were doing the right thing all the time. So we tried to make those moments where we created red carpets for the people who were being impacted.
Well, it sounds like you did, and you had some tough decisions to make with the restructuring of team members, and that's never easy, but you also treated them with the utmost dignity and respect, which is what it's all about. We actually have a question that came in earlier from one of our TMEC members. So, John, I understand you're going to ask a question as it relates to AI. Would you like to pop on and ask that question of the panelists, and then each of you will give you a minute to answer, okay? Not sure if John heard me, so I'm going to ask the question. How do you help people navigate the fear that change brings? So whether it's the fear of AI taking jobs, the fear of them losing their role, or joining a new company culture. Sorry, John, I see you there, but I'm asking the question for you. So, with change can come fear. And I think one of you might have outlined, maybe it was you, Laura, or Alison, people are afraid of the change because they think they're going to lose their job. They're afraid because they think they might lose their stature or status in the organization, the respect level that they've had. Their income might be impacted, their functional role might be impacted. There's a myriad of reasons, right? So, John, anything you want to add to that?
No, that's terrific. It just took a little moment for the system to connect me, but that's exactly it. So the input has been terrific from all the panelists, right? It's been wonderful to hear, but looking for just a little bit more in terms of some of the how we go about it to be able to make that impact. So
thank you so much.
Thank you for
John.
asking my question, Kim.
Thank you, John. Great to have you. So let's start with you, Alison. The fear part. Let's focus on that about a minute or so. How have you handled the fear part?
Sure. One of the best things, and I equate fear and anxiety with resistance to change. That's usually kind of what powers that. And as an HR professional or even a frontline manager, your best approach is to understand and invite your folks to talk about it and be open. What are they concerned with? Because if you get it out on the table, the elephant doesn't look so big once it's in front of you on that table. And that enables you to start kind of understanding, because you might have a team of 4 and they're all going through different various phases of that change or transition curve. And it's like it helps you as a leader so you can kind of message. And what I find with resistance is sometimes the rationale, helping people understand, why did we arrive where we are? What was considered? What were some of the trade-offs we made? Sharing the whys, because it gives folks who are being impacted by the change a little peek under the covers, if you will, and help them understand how we arrived where we are in order to kind of help them through what they're doing. And a second part of that is resistance or anxiety is also a natural diagnostic. People don't always think of it that way. But if you look and see, if you're applying some change management and you're finding, gosh, my people are still anxiety, they're still afraid they're going to leave, look at how you're operating or managing the change. Are we role modeling the behavior we want to see? Do we have leaders that are demonstrating resistance or fear, which is getting telegraphed to the employee population? And perhaps even looking and evaluating at your current change path. Are you going the right way? Is it doing what you wanted to? So leveraging that as a diagnostic can also be a very helpful tool.
Thank you. Laura, I'm going to move over to you because you've obviously, with the acquisitions, I would imagine there's been a lot of fear. Could you speak to that fear and, How did you help deal with the questions like, why are we making these acquisitions? Why do we have to scale? Why do we have to get bigger? How
Yeah,
would you answer?
sure. Sure. I mean, I think when you're looking at acquisitions, there's a strategic reason why you're acquiring a company. And so I'm in tech, ours is a tech product, but at the same time, you're also acquiring talent, right? And so to be able to emphasize and build trust and remind people that, they have great skills and that there are opportunities for them, perhaps what they're working on already, that could then grow into something bigger, I think creates a dialogue. I think looking at that emotional piece is really important. I think, as Alison mentioned, to understand what's holding them back. What are they concerned about? There are concerns that people have when they are acquired that are valid concerns, and that you may not be able to resolve them, and that is a known fact. So at the same time, I think it's also thinking about what are some opportunities for individuals that they may not even been thinking about. They're thinking about their world. They don't know much about the company. And so I think it's developing and cultivating a growth mindset to be able to get them excited about what that future could look like. It really depends on the person in terms of their openness to change, the flexibility with career paths, and their willingness and desire to learn. But I wouldn't underestimate the emotional piece, nor would I not underestimate the context. I think, as Alison mentioned, which is so important to understand, why decisions were made. You may not agree with it, but these were decisions that have a strategic relevance, likely, as I mentioned, in terms of tech, in terms of a tech suite, tech product, right? Capability, whether it's not tech and it's outside, then there's certain reasons why companies are merging or getting acquired, right? It's usually to make something better, or to make a financial reward for an investor, or sell more, or to drive more revenue. So understanding the why and how people are positioned for that, I think, is really important. But having that dialogue, what holds people back is number one.
Again, we're getting back into that radical transparency, that listening. Todd, you actually had said to us, I don't even know if I was doing the right amount of communication. I just was hoping. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you dealt with the fear at your organization? Because you had said clearly, I don't use a template. I don't have a change management template. And you know what? We can use all the templates we want. We have to ebb and flow based on our employees, right? So what would you say as to how you handled that?
Yeah. So I think the most important part of this for us has been over communication. And I wanted to reach the tipping point where people were saying, do we really need to know all of this? And I'll be very honest, we're not there yet. We did all of this transformation work over the summer. So July and August were the big human side of this. The rest of the transformation has grown into the how do we actually live inside the new operating model? And we are just beginning to get our feet under us in that space. So we are still navigating that fear. But what we are doing is we're still over communicating. We're still talking to them all the time. We're answering the hard questions. We built what we called a change champion network, so that they are individual contributors in our organization who are just helping us keep a bit of a pulse. We're not asking them to advocate for us, but we're asking them to help us understand where we are and where we're not communicating right or meeting the business where they need to be met. So we've spent a lot of time with them and the challenge in that room is always ask us the hardest questions. Like, this is the space to do that. And they do. Like, if you give them that freedom, there are a couple times I'm like, wow, that was really brave. But we wanted that. And we underneath it all, we want to do this right. And there is no right way of doing it. And we're in the middle of that now. So we're continuing that. We had a weekly update from our CEO, with a combination of celebration and a combination of here's exactly where we are in this process. And we're moving more towards a newsletter type of thing now, but that's really the space we were trying to provide for them. And then the other thing we have done is we have just provided any resource anybody's asking for. We want to create success in these spaces. This operating model has to work. So for us to do that, we have to listen and resource them in the right ways. And that's helping people are still very afraid, and they're watching, and they're looking to see if they can still trust us. Like there's still a lot of that, but that's what we're working on.
Yeah, John just made a comment that he loves the Change Champion Network. That's wonderful. Laura, I'm going to pass it back to you. 11 countries, you said, and 4 acquisitions. What's the single biggest lesson from your communication plan that's evolved that you know you need to include going forward? And were there any key milestones that you'd like to point out?
We've driven a lot of change in the organization, within our HR function, within each process area within the company, so the change is just constant. I think the biggest thing to me is alignment with the leadership. So you may have some great ideas as an HR practitioner, but you need to be able to align with your leaders to be able to understand the dynamics of this change. So, for example, I partner a lot with our CFO. And so if we introduced and got approval, for example, a reproductive benefit through Carrot, that was a change that was positioned quite readily with alignment with our CEO and CFO, to be able to make a huge investment like that for employees to have a reproductive care benefit. And so there's a cost element of that. And so if you ignore different areas and different stakeholders in terms of alignment, you're not opening and thinking widely. So to be a solid change practitioner, you need to be very much a critical thinker and analyze and assess the impact of what and how this change is going to take, right? So some changes are easy and have a more favorable approach to employees. Sure, it's great to improve and increase someone's short-term disability benefit or, introduce a reproductive benefit. Those are positive changes, right? But when there's changes that are more difficult from an employee perspective that that you need to make, let's say it's a return to the office, that's very, very difficult. You need to be able to communicate and build alignment with the leaders, because at the end of the day, the leaders are the ones working with their team to be able to hold them accountable to come into the office. And the worst thing you can happen and say, the policy was decided, I didn't agree with it.
Right.
And so I think making sure that you're all kind of talking the talk and being able to further align is I think it's the saying, like agree to commit, or you've agreed to disagree, right? But at the same of the day, I'm going to hold the company line. So I think that alignment is really important.
Thanks, Laura. We actually have another question from TMAC. Ken, if you could pop on and ask you a quick question about AI. I know Alison and Laura, you've expressed that you've got different, you're at various stages of using AI. Hi, Ken.
Hi.
Welcome.
Great. Thanks. Great presentation so far. So yeah, I had a follow-up question regarding AI. There's been a lot written about the use of AI in HR. And so my question is, to what extent, if at all, have you been using AI in your transformation? Whether it's been for using it to help you write job descriptions, or maybe helping you with organizational design, or, change management plans. I'm just curious if you've been using AI at all in your transformation.
Thanks, Ken. Alison, let's start with you. I loved when we spoke the other day, you were so honest. So let's start with you and then we'll move over to you, Laura.
Sure. So like many other organizations, we are in our infancy in terms of using AI as an organization. So a couple things that I've done from a practitioner perspective, when I'm anything from building job descriptions to building communications, I love to roll my draft communications through a couple of very commonly used AI tools, crisp them up if I want to make them sound a little bit more human, or I know the target audience will respond a little bit better to kind of this nuance versus that. I'll kind of roll that through and kind of really fine tune and kind of get my communications ready. The other more newer approach I've been having, I actually use it as a thought partner, where I'm actually kind of rolling through scenario planning or I'm like, well, what if we did this and this? And I start kind of building some scenarios. It's really almost like I'm talking to a partner, but they're just a human partner, but they're not available right now. So I get AI, and I still get the benefit of kicking around different ideas and different approaches for me to kind of consider as I'm starting to kind of solution something from an HR or a change perspective.
Very, very helpful. Laura, I know you're more advanced, so could you tell us what your mindset is toward AI?
Sure. So in what I think Alison mentioned in terms of the content generation, I think is really helpful and useful. So similar as well. From an HR perspective, we had built an employee support agent to be able to answer employee questions. We had rolled that out much earlier in this year. And so we direct questions to the agent to be able to respond. From a candidate perspective, we're using AI to be able to position and have those conversations in terms of the offers, in terms of understanding how to negotiate with the candidate, understanding and researching where the candidate's coming from. We've also have written policies as well and asked questions in terms of, what is the labor law in Vietnam, for example, and sort of understand that definitely from a directional perspective. Where we're headed next is really to look at our transactional work. For example, generating offer letter. How do you take success factors where there's an approval workflow? How can you get that to then generate an offer letter without a human preparing the offer letter? Or how do you look at ensuring that a letter that's generated in terms of our success factors change, for example, we're using Joule, the success factors that they do that for you in terms of a work location change or a job code change or whatever it may be, a vacation request. So that's really more advanced in terms of the software system, obviously what we have, but in terms of getting it to initiate for you, I think another area is really kind of we're working towards is that analytical view in terms of you've heard a lot around predictive analytics. We're not as deep in the analytics, but what you want to be able to get to is to be able to say, hey, in the next year, who is going to resign because of what factors that they may be experiencing today, whether it's low leadership trust scores from their manager or it's high absenteeism or low performance rating and they haven't had a raise in 3 years. How are you predicting attrition in terms of that? We're personally not focused on that, but I think that's a big area to be able to tie things together in terms of having an agent be able to do that for you. Right? To be able to say, hey, I've noticed that Sally on your team hasn't had a raise in 3 years and, her performance, yet she's been a consistently top performer and she hasn't been promoted in 2 years. You might want to consider, taking a look at her compensation. So getting it to be able to predict and be able to drive you to action, I think is really eventually where we want to get this towards. But what we're focused on now, as I mentioned, is trial of our next step is to be able to automate some of the processes. It is more end to end. How do we do that? So it's a fine balance because when you look at some of the processes, for example, onboarding, how do we scale? Well, it's thinking, okay, making that standard is to have a recording. Right? But how do you still bring that personal touch? How do you bring an agent in there to be able to simplify and identify that experience to say, oh, it looks like you will need this as you onboard. But that's really where we're headed next.
So as we can see, there's, we're all at different ends of the spectrum depending on the adoption of our senior leadership teams primarily and funding and mindset. So we could do a whole webinar on AI and there's so many out there and people are posting in chat. So please do look at the chat for resources. Thank you both, Alison and Laura. I'm going to shift over now to practical tools and templates because people really want to be able to walk away and do something tomorrow. Todd, you had mentioned that you had a 8-question survey that you administered. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so we use the Marcus Buckingham Standout Engagement Survey. Some of you are probably familiar with that. It's a 8-question, me versus we. How do you feel engaged in the organization? There's also a resiliency tool that is another survey, but it's do you have everything you need to do your job? And we use that engagement survey quarterly, and that is a intentional, so that we can make micro changes, see who's doing well, who's slipping, who's growing in engagement, and just keep a complete pulse on the engagement side. It's one of the tools we've been using through this transformation. We just finished assessing the data from our most recent survey. I've been watching to see if that tool has been an indicator of some of the successes of this transformation. The board asks me, how are you going to know if that worked? How are you going to know like if transformation worked or not? And engagement is really one of the data-driven tools that we can use to be able to say that there has been a shift up and or down in this. I will say that our engagement has been steady. There have not been big ripples up and down. I was very, very curious to see how that was going to change engagement. But with a lot of new staff members who are highly engaged in the business, we've been seeing more of a steady versus ripples in the engagement.
Thank you. Alison, I'm going to move over to you. I know you had mentioned you have a 3-template approach. The as is, should be being one of them, key stakeholder assessment and how to deal with change, and then the gap-based planning. Could you just tell us in a minute or two how you've used those tools?
Sure. So essentially it comes in Excel, and it's one of those things that you kind of take as you're kind of unpacking what the nature of your change is. Your second tab is your stakeholder analysis with, again, the fun little weather, icons. Who loves the change? Who's lukewarm? Who's resistant? And then you finish out with your comms plans. And what's really nice is it's all baked into one template. And a new add that we've done is we're adding an additional worksheet, which is a post-mortem. So after your change is done, it's great to come back alongside your stakeholders after the change and just kind of poke around what worked well. What should we possibly do differently? What should we do more of in the future? Anything we should do less of? So you keep it simple, excuse me, and you use that to kind of drive conversations on how to evolve your change approach for the future.
That's great. So those are available in Excel. And the tool that Todd used, if you wouldn't mind posting that, Todd, in the chat, your survey, that'd be great. People are asking for it. Laura, you have had these acquisitions. Looking back on the first acquisition to where you are now, is there a tool that you're currently using that you wish you had back then that you could share with the group that they could access? Simple template, anything like that you'd suggest?
Well, I think we've had such a range, right, of acquisitions. The first company that we acquired was 300 employees, which was a week after officially I started, to then our last acquisition, which was almost a year ago. So in terms of tools and templates, I think I would encourage you to, ask ChatGPT to say, what do you recommend is the most highly valuable tool to be able to help you with what you're looking for? I think having an ability to have like a culture diagnostic in terms of understanding. I think there was a question in the chat from Tracy to say, assessing and understanding the culture of your acquired company is really helpful. So asking like, well, what questions can prompt you or tell me what I need to know about this company? They're going to synthesize the Glassdoor reviews. That's what ChatGPT is going to do, right? And so how do you be able to use AI to be able to build the tools is really where you want to be thinking through that, because it has, a lot of great resources out there. So I'd encourage you to think through that.
Thank you. So, gosh, I'm looking at the time and we're going to do a rapid fire question to each of you. So Todd, I'm going to flip it over to you. What's one takeaway or advice that you can give attendees that they can implement tomorrow?
Build your communication strategy, and not for just what's going out this week, but plan it for the year. Like send it all the way across. It was the single most important element to this entire transformation.
Alison?
Understand your stakeholders, know who your advocates are gonna be, so you can tuck them in and make your change and the outcomes a success.
Thank you, Alison. And Laura?
I would say be empathetic. There's a lot that's happening in people's lives on the home front, the economy, the world. Like there's just a lot. And so people bring with them a lot of pressure. So being understanding and empathetic, how much change people can really handle. You hear about change fatigue and change overload, like that's all can make it easier with change and how you support and encourage people. But really, it's not as easy, for people. So understanding and being empathetic, I think, is super important.
And you really drilled home, all of you, the importance of the listening, the radical listening as much as the radical communication. So I encourage you all to view the recording again, which you'll receive in your email. We also wanted Angelica to just pop on. Do you have anything else to say about TMAC? I know you have the December session coming up on the 5th. Anything else you want to say, Angelica?
Thank you, Kim. We didn't mention TMAC is also a free membership. So high value, high reward, not a whole lot of investment, although we do encourage our members to be involved. We will have more sessions, both content, social networking coming in 2026, as I mentioned. So if anybody would like to learn more, please join us on LinkedIn, and we'll make sure you're connected and added to our distribution lists. Thank you again, Kim, for having us on this call and for your partnership. This was a great call. So thank you to the panelists for sharing your wisdom and experiences, your insights, and offering both really innovative solutions and also empathetic ones. It was really nice to see both the expertise and also the human piece in your presentations.
Yes, I echo that. Alison, Laura, and Todd, you were very giving of your time. We really appreciate it. One of the things that we always hear is people who attend these webinars want to hear from their colleagues, HR practitioners. So originally when we planned this, we were going to have subject matter experts from Keystone, but once you all said you would do it, we did change management. We practiced change management, and you all came together. So thank you so much. For those of you that are on, if you have any future topics that you would like us to address, please let us know. We're always looking for great ideas. And if there's anything we can double click on that you heard in this webinar today, a deeper dive, we're happy to do those in 2026. We're wishing you all wonderful, healthy, happy, successful holiday season, as well as 2026. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We wish you all the best, and make sure you connect with each other. Network. Take care.